All right. Hello, Summer.
Hi, how is everybody doing today?
Yeah, we're good. We're excited to have you here. Yay! We love Summer Bock.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah, so let me just do a quick welcome to everyone. This is a live Q&A session that we're doing with gut rebuilding and fermentation expert Summer Bock. I'm just going to remind everyone to please keep their lines muted so we don't have any background noise. Of course, there's an opportunity to ask questions, but I'm going to invite you to use that chat box to do that. And I want to thank everyone for being here. You know, everyone's busy, and I appreciate people taking the time to take this time for themselves to learn about the amazing benefits of fermented foods. I was just telling everyone, Summer, before you get on the call, I didn't really know a lot about fermented foods until I met you. And you're the one that really kind of inspired me to add more into my diet. And, I'm eager to try, like, I haven't braved it yet because I've been so intimidated. I think there's a lot of people that are intimidated about making fermented foods, which is why I wanted to do a demo today, because it really is simple and it doesn't have to take a ton of time. So here's the plan. What we're going to do is I'm just going to start by inviting Summer to introduce herself. She has a really amazing story, so I want her to share a little bit about her story, why she does what she does. She's amazingly passionate about fermented foods, and she's the person, like I said, that got me excited about it. That's how passionate she is. It's very contagious. And then she's going to share some tips for making fermented foods. She's going to show us how easy it is. She's got a couple recipes. She's going to show us how to make our own fermented veggies, and she's got a red wine vinegar, which I'm excited to hear about because I love putting red wine vinegar on my food. And then we'll do some Q&A. So I'm going to invite you to post your questions live. I've got a bunch of questions that people sent in ahead of time, so we'll try to alternate between the two, and hopefully we get to everyone's questions. We'll try our best. The time goes by really fast, so we're gonna see as many questions as we can get. But let's get started with Summer. If you could just tell us a little bit about your story, why are you so passionate, about teaching people about fermented foods?
Well, for me, it started back so long ago when I did a cleanse, and I was about day 5 in the cleanse, and I felt like a wool blanket had been taken out of my brain. And I looked around and I literally felt like everything looked crystal clear. I felt calm. I had no anxiety for the first time in my life. And this was new. Like I was like, oh wait, this is how normal people feel. This is how normal people function. Like, as a teenager, I would spend my days on the couch after school, just like completely wiped out.
Yeah.
I didn't have the kind of energy that my friends had. I didn't really understand how normal people were doing it until I reached that day on the cleanse. And that was a catalyst for me. From that point forward, I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to be healthy and how to feel like this without having to be on this really weird extreme cleanse. You know what I mean?
Right.
Okay, there's got to be some sustainable manner to this.
Right.
So, fast forward, a whole bunch of other things happened, along the way. But, I went to college after that, and I was dealing with some serious health concerns. And I think they were exacerbated by the stress of school and staying up late and trying to finish all your homework and being in pre-med, and it was crazy. And during that time, I would wake up in the middle of the night with panic attacks, and this was not like people really still think it's in your head, and I woke up in the middle of the night, my heart rate, sometimes I counted it was like 188 beats per minute from sleep, like deep sleep into that. I had hives on and off, random times. My eyes would swell in these really weird ways. The whites of my eyes would actually swell bigger than the iris. It was really gross. I've actually, since sharing that story, I've heard other people have told me they've had that same experience, which is so affirming, I think, to know that I'm not the only person out there.
Yeah.
And I had, bloating and weird digestive issues. And I just honestly, I craved like sweets and ice cream all the time. And everything was a mess, I would always get sores around my mouth and my nose. And, I was allergic to all the pollen, every pollen season that would happen. And, it occurred to me one day while I was watching the pollen, I was like, you know what, this doesn't make sense. Like, I should not be allergic to the world that I was born into. Like that, I'm going to do everything I can to heal myself of my allergies. And so I actually ended up going to my doctor again, and she was like, what are you doing here? I was like, I'm like, look at my eyes. This is weird. Like, help. I'm like red and puffy and hives and panicking. And she goes, listen, Summer, you know more about this than I do. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to write you a prescription. You're not going to fill it. I don't think it's going to do anything anyway. So what are you doing here? And it's true. Like I was working with her patients at that time and health coaching her patients, getting great results, but I just had like these weird symptoms that at the time you couldn't Google gut health. You couldn't Google probiotics. Like none of that stuff was out there yet. So I ended up learning about probiotics and started taking them, and they helped. And then because of my training, I actually, when I did my first cleanse, I was in herbal medicine school. And because of my training as an herbalist, I have this like foundation of asking, you know, like, how did my ancestors do this? How did people 500 years ago do this? You know? And so I'm really like holding this little probiotic pill, about to take it. I'm like, my ancestors, this is essential. This is this thing that we're all supposed to have. My ancestors weren't taking this little pill made in a laboratory. So what is the whole food version of probiotics? And that's when I discovered fermented foods. You know, I started looking into it. I was like, okay, so there's something here. My ancestors did this, and this has been around for tens of thousands of years that we know of. Like, we don't really know how long it traces back. So I started making my own fermented foods, went crazy, fermented everything. And it really made a big difference. I mean, this was the beginning of like my road back to health. However, since then, and probably just based on my genetics, I don't have a high tolerance for histamines because of my genetic SNPs. So over time, I learned that I can't quite tolerate as much fermented foods as people. So even though I am a fermentation expert, I work as a fermentationist. I teach people about this all the time. I do personally, I eat it on a regular basis. I just have to be conscious of the amounts that I'm eating. And just play with that. I can't be one of those people that just eats bowl after bowl of sauerkraut with my meals, or I will end up with hives again.
That was actually going to be, that was a question someone had sent in. And so I think it's a good time to address it. What are histamines, and what does it mean to be, you know, sensitive to them? Because I think that's a common thing that people might be experiencing. They may not actually even know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating topic, and there's still so much to learn. But histamines are basically these neurotransmitters. Essentially, they're created in your they're created by your immune system. They are in your mast cells, and they're released as an immune response. And you have mast cells all around your nose, your mucous membranes, and they all line your stomach as well. And so these mast cells are there to help you. If they sense that there's like a foreign invader or something, they'll get triggered as a way to get more white blood cells there. The histamine is literally just like a messenger that says, hey, immune system, kick into high gear. We need to do something about this. So then so histamines are made by our body. They're natural. And then there's also histamines found in food. So some foods have higher histamines than others. Fermented foods are actually really high in histamine, and that's because the probiotics, there are certain probiotics in fermented foods that make histamine. They take histidine, which is a common, amino acid that's found in food, and they convert it from histidine into histamine. And then, so you can end up having histamine in your body that's produced by your body. You can end up having organisms in your body breaking down histidine in the food that you're eating and making more histamine, or you can be eating foods that have a high histamine content produced by these organisms. So it's just worth thinking about that there's a lot of different ways that people can be struggling with histamine issues. And for me, my biggest symptoms are like my ears start to ring. That's my first symptom that my histamine's getting high. Anger and anxiety are like my second symptom, right behind it, really close. So if I hear my ears starting to ring, like in a quiet room, if it just feels like the room is loud, that's when I know my histamine levels are high, and I do things to make sure that I handle that quickly rather than letting it spiral out of control like it used to and ending up in just a state of panic. And then over time, it turns into like rashes all over my neck, my chest, my legs. It turns into this just horrible nightmare if I let it get out of control.
Does it show up differently in different people? Like, so you said it's ringing, rashes, and anger, anxiety. Will it show up in the same way in somebody else, or could it show up completely different? Like, how does someone sort of know?
I think it's different for different people. I mean, a lot of the symptoms are there's a range of symptoms. For some people, it's migraines or headaches. For some people, their eyes water a lot or their nose runs a lot. For some people, I think it can be like muscle tension, things like that. I've heard a lot of different symptoms across the gamut with this one. But what I do when I work with my clients on histamine issues, the main thing that we focus on is figuring out, well, what are your initial symptoms? Like, what are the ones, like, what are the things that let you know early on, the early warning symptoms that your histamine is getting high, so you can do something about it before it turns into the debilitating symptoms?
Okay. So people with histamine, because we could probably do a whole call on this. I just want to clarify one thing. So people with histamine intolerance, they can have small amounts of fermented foods. It's just that they have to monitor, right? They're going to be more sensitive than others. So they have to monitor the amount. Is it?
Yes, and there's other, I mean, part of it is also figuring out what's going on, right? Like, so why is the body triggering histamine really, like, why can't you process it?
Yeah.
Is it because there's a DOA inhibition in the body, which is the enzyme that breaks down histamine?
Yeah.
Is it because you have more histamine being produced than you should? Maybe you have a bunch of bacteria that shouldn't be there, or maybe you have an infection. I think that the thing across the board that I'm seeing is that there's a potential infection associated with people with histamine issues. And like, I've worked through so many infections, I feel like I'm in a good place. And then I stumbled very recently upon something about people with histamine issues have certain bacteria that live in their sinuses. So like now I don't know enough about that yet, but I'm kind of on that path, learning about that piece now. Because like I said, this is just it's a little known area, because it's confusing for the medical system, because they're just not used to dealing with something that's endogenous to the body, right? Like, they don't know how to deal with things that our body produces on its own.
Right.
They need it to be always something attacking, and it gets very confusing.
Yeah.
So I think the one thing I have noticed for people with histamine issues also is they tend to be in a state of stress. So they tend to stay more in sympathetic overdrive.
Yeah.
And if they can learn how to be in a parasympathetic state, oftentimes that handles about 90 to 98% of people's histamine issues, just that alone.
Yeah.
There's many reasons, like, you could go down the whole chain reaction. I mean, stress also triggers pathogenic bacteria to grow faster in the human body.
Yeah.
There's, SIBO, all these other things. So it's, is the chicken and the egg thing is really difficult when you're looking at when you look at the body as an ecosystem, which it is, with all these different organisms living and growing together and supporting each other and always changing, then it's just a little bit more complex view of the body, but I think it's way more accurate than the simplistic view that we tend to take on.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. We could talk about this for, like, we could probably just do the call.
I know, do a whole one on histamine, but yeah.
Yeah.
And it's good for people to know, because we're getting into the fermented foods. I actually think this is a great way to start it out, because some people don't realize this, and they'll eat a lot of fermented foods because they get really excited, and then they might have some reactions. And I would just say, back down. Maybe you need to work on your gut more. Maybe you need to fix some stuff that's going on, and then you'll be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's just talk briefly. First of all, I just want to make sure everyone understands what a fermented food is, because someone might be listening and be like, I've heard of fermented foods, I don't know what it is. What is it? And then can you just talk briefly about how fermented foods can be used to build, I wanted to say this at the beginning, you're the person that actually coined the phrase gut rebuilding. So how can we use fermented foods to do that, and especially build the immune system? I mean, I think a lot of people are concerned right now about their immune health. So how what are the benefits of fermented foods on the gut and the immune system?
Sure. Well, I'll start. So with what a fermented food is, essentially, you ferment something when you take a microorganism. It can be a yeast, it can be a bacteria, and you let that organism break down usually starches or sugars in that food. And as they do it, they create various byproducts. I teach primarily functional ferments. So my focus is on foods that actually have a functional benefit to the body. They either bring probiotic organisms into the gut through those fermented foods, or by being pre-digested, it's unlocking various nutrients that you wouldn't otherwise get using the process of fermentation. And what's interesting is, I focus on fermented vegetables a lot, because I think that you can tailor any kind of sauerkraut or fermented vegetable recipe around your various food intolerances or food allergies. So that's nice. It doesn't have dairy. It doesn't have all the things that people might struggle with. So this is really one of my favorite, out the gate, like, this is the starter ferment for most people. And I think it has a great benefit. And when you look at the research, I mean, there's anywhere from 13 to 23 different kinds of probiotics inside these vegetable ferments, depending on what you add. If you start adding garlic and you start adding onion and inulin, this like amazing prebiotic starch, along with chili flakes, you actually get more diversity.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that a little bit, and I'll show you some easy recipes today.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating to me is, like, as you eat fermented foods, not every single probiotic that you eat is going to stay and live in your gut. However, all of those organisms and their byproducts, mainly in sauerkraut and fermented veggies, lactic acid, which is what gives it the sour flavor. We don't add vinegar. We just literally add salt and veggies, create an anaerobic environment, and then they produce carbon dioxide and lactic acid as a byproduct from breaking down the starches in the cabbage and the other vegetables. Mm-hmm. And that lactic acid acts as a fertilizer for the gut microbiome. And it's a really powerful fertilizer because it actually helps to kill off pathogenic organisms. And it helps to change the pH of the gut, and it really assists in getting the microbiome balanced. So even if some of those organisms are transient and they just kind of pass through, they're still helping as they go through. And then they also provide these various bacteriocins like lactic acid, but there's other bacteriocins. Now the term bacteriocin, it's like, the best way to describe it, it's like a natural antibiotic, really. It's like an antimicrobial substance that these organisms create to keep other organisms from growing. And so we use this to our benefit. And I think that's why we've co-evolved with these organisms, because they want us to eat them for some reason. And they I don't know how this all started. Like it still blows my mind to this day to really think about, like, how did we figure this out? But we literally have co-evolved. And so they basically are helping us to keep our gut microbiome balanced, and we're maintaining their livelihood by growing things for them to live in.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. You're adding good stuff in, but you're also naturally killing off bad guys. Mm-hmm. So I love that relationship that you have with the food, creating that natural balance. Because I think a lot of times people just think you're just putting good bacteria in, but you're also balancing it by killing off bad guys. So that's such a great point. And then can you just comment quickly on how is it actually boosting the immune system? I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize so much of their immune health is actually in their gut.
Yeah, I mean, experts say anywhere from 70 to 90% of your immune system actually lies in the gut itself. And that has to do with a multitude of factors, but the organisms are actually really close to the walls of your intestines, and they're hanging out and they're communicating with your immune cells. And they're saying to your immune cells, hey, we're the good guys. Like, here's what our DNA looks like. Put us put us on your white list. Like, we're in the contact list. Like, don't spam us. So they have this like nice relationship. But what can happen with lots of antibiotics or other, even severe illnesses, even without antibiotics, severe illnesses can cause your microbiome to get ravished, and you can end up with other microorganisms along the wall of your intestines. They start communicating to your immune cells. And that's where people can deal with autoimmunity and other issues like that. Or what I talked about with histamine, where these pathogenic bacteria are on the walls and they're communicating, and it's putting your immune system in just overdrive. So your immune system is working harder than it's supposed to. Yeah. And these microorganisms, they produce a lot of vitamins that help boost our immunity as well. They produce these vitamins on site in our intestines, and they get absorbed immediately through the intestinal wall. And then, there's that crowding out piece as well. Like, when you have a really good balanced microbiome with good probiotics living there, they crowd out the pathogenic bacteria on their own, and they make it harder for the imbalances to happen. And all of this is so crucial to our immune function.
Yeah.
Think about it. Your skin has its own barrier of bacteria on it that helps keep the pH of your skin more acidic, so that mold and organisms can't live on your skin. Literally, the reason your skin looks like skin is because of the bacteria that are invisibly growing there that are keeping this pH acidic so nothing else can grow. That's really cool. But it's really hard to get through our skin layer, right? It's hard to get into the human body, but we have to eat every day in order to stay alive. Yeah. So as we're eating, we're breaking through the immune barrier just by putting food into our mouths. So there's a lot of factors at play. Obviously, we need to have good, strong hydrochloric acid to break down and kill any of the bacteria that might come in. But as they get through the intestinal tract, these bacteria are also there to help with that process of keeping microorganisms from being able to take over and grow. Mm-hmm. So, there's just so many factors. When you look at people's illnesses and you look at rebuilding the gut first, we really see that there is a strong correlation between people with that healthy gut microbiome and overall great health. When you look at diversity is a big one. The more diverse your microbiome is, the less likely you are to have diabetes, the less likely you are to be overweight or have obesity. And all these things are just literally associated with what you're putting in your mouth.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah, it is amazing. All right. So I already see people like firing questions away. We will get to those as you're talking. They're like asking questions in the chat box, but I want to start with the demo.
Okay.
So if we can get into doing the demo first, and then we'll go deeper with Summer, and we'll get into the Q&A, because I know a lot of people are eager to ask. But so take it away. Tell us what we're making. Are you in your new studio, by the way?
This is my new studio.
Yeah.
I need a little bit more light. Missing some light over here, but this will do for now. Usually I stand up, but we're just gonna sit down and do it today.
That's okay.
So I'm gonna make just a really simple ferment today, you guys. I'm gonna make one of my favorite blends of vegetables. And I just wanna talk about like the process of doing this. First of all, when you do this at home, making anything fermented at home is going to be better than buying it from the store. Buying it from the store is your second option. And it's okay to buy it from the store, but when you make it at home, you can control the ingredients, you control how long it's been fermenting, and so you can actually eat things at their peak microbial, time. So I think that's really important. First off, I'm just gonna show you, I'm gonna start off and I'm going to shred this cabbage. It might get a little bit noisy. Let me know if you can't hear me while I'm doing this for any reason. But I just shred the cabbage. I try to be fairly mindful of making close to the same size shreds. And I'm just gonna dump the shredded cabbage into this bowl. I always take out the core, so I cored this before I saw you guys. I washed it off. I don't scrub it or anything crazy. And there are microbes living on these vegetables, like on these leaves, just like they live on our skin, they live in these vegetables. And they have very similar function for the vegetables as well. So we're letting these microbes, just basically we're gonna give them the perfect environment where they can grow, reproduce, and then enter our bodies. So I'm just gonna chop this up. I'm not gonna chop up a whole lot right now because I have a fairly small jar, and I'll explain kind of how I do this. And the way I make fermented vegetables is, you guys, it's a very simple way. I'm gonna do this really without a recipe today. And the reason I wanna show you that is because I want you to understand how easy it is to make this. There's a really special trick that I'm gonna teach you for making this on your own. I am gonna add garlic today because I'm a huge fan of garlic. It has inulin. Inulin is a prebiotic. And what's fascinating about inulin is that it selects for the probiotics, meaning nothing else can eat it. Like no other microorganisms can eat it except for the probiotics, which is super cool. I'm just gonna chop this one really like in half, because I like finding big garlic pieces in my ferment. I just really enjoy that flavor. And it always feels like a little present. I'm like, oh, there's a piece of garlic.
I love garlic.
And the reason I'm also showing you guys garlic as something to add, if this is your first time making this, I just want you to know people sometimes fail the first time they make fermented vegetables. Sometimes they fail the second time. You'll eventually get it right, and I'm going to show you a few tricks today that will help make sure that you can successfully do this. Another one of those tricks is onion. Onion has great prebiotics. I am probably going to start crying. That's just how it goes. Me and onion, it makes me real sad. So basically the onion has inulin in it as well. And this inulin is going to help ensure that your fermented vegetable goes well. I guess that's the best way to describe it. When people aren't sure or they've been failing at making sauerkraut, I always say, you know what, you need to really start using a little bit of garlic and a little bit of onion in your ferment because it gives you a better chance of success at the beginning. So I'm gonna add this onion in here. You can chop it as fine as you would like. I'm probably doing a little coarse just because we're doing the demo right now. And then finally, so here I have the cabbage, onion, and garlic, and then I shredded this carrot ahead of time. I'm gonna dump the carrot in there. I love the taste of fermented carrot. I think it is absolutely delicious, and it adds just a little bit of sweetness. All right, I'm gonna attempt to put that all in this jar. It probably won't all fit, but we'll see what happens. Now at this point, you're gonna see, this is where I like don't use a recipe, okay? And I wanna show you this because this is key to you, like looking in your fridge and finding what vegetables you have, what's maybe on the verge that you need to hurry up and use today. If you don't have all the exact ingredients, you can make your own recipe. And the secret is, you really want to add enough salt to make it taste like a Lay's potato chip. I always just use that example. You know how with like I don't know if you've eaten, I'm not like a potato chip eater. I know that sounds weird because I eat super healthy, but you know how like when you eat a Lay's potato chip or a salty thing, you can't just take, it's their motto. You can't just have one or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't just have one bite. I can't remember their exact motto, but something along those lines. And that's why I use that example, is because I want you to remember that you want this to be salty enough to where when you taste this, before you start putting it away in the jar, you taste this, you are literally wanting to take another bite because it's so salty and yummy. Now, as it ferments, it's going to get more diluted, right? All the moisture is going to start coming out of this, out of the vegetable matter, and it will get diluted and less salty. But when you put it in the jar, you want it as salty as a potato chip. Now, as I start to do this, it will start getting very moist and very wet because that salt already is pulling out the moisture. It's breaking down and dehydrating the cells. And then I'm just kind of crushing this a little bit. I try not to go overly crazy with massaging the cabbage. I think it can get to the point where it loses its crunch after it ferments.
Yeah.
So I'm really just trying to mix in the salt, and then I'm going to taste a little bite of cabbage, preferably. I don't really want to eat the raw onion. Yeah, it needs a little bit more. Like, you'll know what I mean. If you're like, I don't know if it's salty enough, it's not salty enough. When you like immediately go back for that next bite, you're like, what? I should serve this as like a salad, at dinner tonight. Yes, if you have it at that level, then you've done it right. And in fact, I've taught fermentation demos before, and then gone to a potluck, and I showed up at a potluck and I didn't know it was a potluck. And I was like, oh no, I don't have anything. And I was like, wait a minute. And I grabbed my fresh jar of,
nice.
It wasn't sauerkraut yet. It was just salted vegetables at that point because it hadn't had time to ferment. It had only been in for an hour. And I served it, and within 20 minutes, the entire bowl was gone.
Wow.
Like, what was that? I was like, salad? I don't know. What do you call that? Coleslaw without the mayo? I don't know. It was delicious. So just mixing this a little bit more. I'm just going to get the salt all mixed up, and I want to taste this, and then I'll explain what happens in this process of fermentation. Yeah, like that. I wish you could taste it.
Yeah, looks good.
Like I want to keep eating it. Like that's right when I'm salty. Okay, so let's talk about what happens next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit in this at a time, and I'm going to pack it down. Sometimes people will fill the entire jar and then they pack it down. You really want to start packing it down from the very beginning. Yep. You want to smash all those leaves down. You want to get everything as close to the bottom as possible because you're trying to eliminate all the air bubbles. That's a really important part of this. So you can get some leverage here and stand up. So what's going to happen is as this ferments over the next couple weeks, it's going to be hanging out, sitting here, and there's going to be 3 different successions of bacteria. The first succession of bacteria is with this bacteria called Leuconostochmus enteroides. And they come in and they start the party. They get like all the starches going, they're digesting it, they're making some acids, and they're releasing carbon dioxide, which, by the way, ferment means to boil in Greek. And so when you actually see a time lapse of sauerkraut, it looks like it's boiling.
Yeah.
There's bubbles. It bubbles this carbon dioxide up all the time. So that first stage, that first succession of bacteria is like after a forest fire, the first succession of plants is the wildflowers. And they come in, they have their purpose, and then the next succession is the shrubs. And usually once the shrubs come in, it starts to actually dominate and crowd out the wildflowers. And then they die off. And then the next succession is the trees. So for us, it's the Leuconostochmus enteroides. They start to get a little bit more acidic. And then the next 2 successions are these various kinds of lactobacillus. And they come in and they do the same thing, and they enjoy this highly acidic environment. Whereas the Leuconostoc only like a mildly acidic environment. And then they just kind of recede and they stop multiplying. And then we end up with higher numbers of lactobacillus. And so I hope you can see this. I don't know if you can.
Beautiful.
But do you see, I don't know if you can see the juices.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How it's bubbling up, like that's really key. So that's the brine. That's what's creating the anaerobic environment so that no oxygen is going to go down and penetrate this food. It's what's going to keep it from spoiling, basically.
Yeah. Quick question, Summer. We have a few people asking what kind of salt you're using.
I'm using pink Himalayan sea salt, but I love using Celtic sea salt, but it's really coarse. So when I'm doing demos, a lot of times I use the fine Himalayan sea salt so that my knuckles don't get all raw.
Gotcha. Okay.
But at home, like when I'm doing my own ferments, a lot of times I'll use a spice grinder and grind up the Celtic sea salt.
Okay.
I love Celtic sea salt. I just like the flavor, but they're both fantastic.
And then someone's asking, can you add red onion?
You can add anything.
Okay.
I mean, you know, think about it this way. When you're first experimenting, think about it as a salad. Like if you were making a salad, you would want the lettuce to be the primary component, and then you'd want to add like, you know, whatever herbs and nuts and maybe some apples, and those would all be like in smaller proportions.
Yeah.
So make sure proportionally you're thinking about it as a salad. If you add way too many of one kind of vegetable, it can make it taste really funky. And that's why I always recommend tasting it before you put it in. Make sure. I used to make these super healthy ferments and they were so nasty. I would be like, let's put everything green in it. And then you were just like, this is like sludge by the time you're done. You really want to make it taste good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I will show you a couple things. So I want to talk about like next steps. Once I get this full, there's a couple options. And I actually, sadly, I've been teaching so many fermentation classes because of everything going on. I'm out of weights right now. I have to go get some more. So I'll kind of talk to you. I'll show you one way to deal with this. And I'm going to go rinse off my hands really quick.
Okay, sure.
But I can hear you guys. So hold on one second.
Yeah. So while we're waiting for Summer, if anyone has any questions, keep posting them in the chat box because I want to make sure that we get them answered. Can you still hear me, Summer?
Yes, I can.
Someone's asking if the probiotics and fermented foods are good for urinary tract issues.
I mean, that depends on the kind of urinary tract issue. There's people who have like interstitial cystitis who kind of have to be careful about their pH of their urine and things like that.
Yeah.
But in general, you know, this would be very similar to taking a probiotic pill. Yeah. So let me just show you really quick what I would do at this point. So you have it full. Your brine it's there, but it's not totally covering it. That's okay. Within an hour, the brine will be there. And if it's not, you could make like a 3 to 5% saltwater solution and just pour it to where it's an inch over the top. And sometimes, depending on like this time of year, the cabbage, it was harvested last fall. And so it might be a little bit more dehydrated. It may not have as much moisture. So sometimes you don't get as much brine if it's not as fresh. So if that's the case, just make sure you add it within the first few hours. You don't want to add it the next day or later because it will affect the pH and you can make it go bad.
Yeah.
So I always wipe off the edges. I really try to get all the vegetables just like lying flat down in here. And then at this point, I'm going to see if this fits. Oh yeah, that fits perfectly. Okay, so I'm really happy in a way that I'm out of my normal supplies because usually I use this thing that has a fancy lid and a fancy airlock.
Yeah.
But I really want to show you, like, you can actually find a jar at home and then you can fill this with water. I'm just going to put it in here like this for now. And then this becomes your weight and it kind of protects it at the same time. So I'm going to add some water to this. And it just really helps with the process. And then you can put a little towel over the top with a rubber band so that no bugs get in. And this would be a really cool way to use that. I love using jars because you can see through, you can see the process, you can see what's happening, you can see when they become translucent.
Yeah.
As soon as those leaves become translucent, it's done, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
But it's also okay, that usually takes 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. But it's also okay to put it in your fridge at 1 week and be okay with like what we call, it's like a younger ferment. It's not as mature. That's okay. It's really up to your taste. And I recommend if this is your first time making it, try it every day. Just like take this out, reach down in here, take a bite, clean hands, smush everything back down where it needs to be,
Yep.
put it back in here, put it back on. It's okay to take care of it like a little chia pet on your counter. Like be friends with it, see what's happening in there, and really taste it and let your taste buds dictate when it's done. When you like it, you're like, that's delicious. then go, take this out, move it into the fridge, find a room for it or whatever, and then you're good to go. I would not leave this in direct sunlight. It's okay to leave on the counter. You just don't want the sun pounding on it. It's not ideal. And then I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to try to show you guys this crazy thing. So this is some kimchi that I made. This is like this super fancy porcelain crock. I got it from this lady in Portland, and it has a moat around the top. And this moat, you put water in it, and it actually, do you see how it has this like moat? You put the water in, and that creates the airlock, and so the carbon dioxide actually bubbles out, and so you don't have any, you don't end up with the pressure that way, and that way no oxygen can go in.
Yeah.
And so this has been going for a little while. I'm just gonna use my thing here and just show you guys and see if you can see inside there.
Oh yeah.
So those are the weights. Yeah. Those are actually ceramic. Ceramic is fantastic because ceramic is non-porous.
Okay.
And this is crazy. Like, I'll show you a little piece. So this is a green onion that's all fermented. See how it's more translucent?
Yeah.
It doesn't have that white appearance. It's very translucent.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff smells insane. I wish you guys could be here and just all eat this together because it's ready to eat. And I don't know if I can eat all of this. It smells so good. I made this one actually with I actually used a potato as a little secret that somebody shared online. I wanted to see if it would work, and it has worked fabulously.
How long do you have to eat it? You know what I'm saying? Like, once you put it in the fridge?
Years.
Really?
I mean, honestly, within 8 months is probably the best, because within 8 months, you're going to have the most crunch. But after that, it doesn't actually technically go bad. And what people tend to do with it at that point is they tend to make soup out of it, or use it in a stir fry, something like that.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Oh, and it's pretty.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it though.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm just really excited for you guys to make it too. I think this is going to be a really fun experiment, because here's the thing too. When you make something like this, you're actually like testing your own senses.
Yeah.
Because I'm asking you to put these vegetables on the countertop and let them sit for a while, which we've always been told if something sits outside of the fridge for longer than a few hours, we need to toss it, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this idea that, everything needs to be so sterile and that things go bad and all this stuff. But what we've created is a very sustainable ecosystem here. This was invented before refrigerators existed as a way to preserve food through the winter.
Yeah.
And for this natural, ancient food preservation method is actually really fascinating. And so when you open this up after a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, when you're eating it and trying it, there might be a part of your brain, which I've experienced this many times with many different ferments, especially when I moved on to the bean ferments, where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to eat beans that were sitting out. Like, that's another level. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But like, as you're tasting it and trying this out, it may be difficult. Like, I always had this terror barrier is what I call it. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to poison myself. But the first thing that you do, I'm going to tell you my 3 steps. First thing you do is you smell it. Does it smell like food, or does it smell like bad humans? If it smells like bad humans, don't eat it. Or just like gross. If it smells disgusting, it needs to smell like food. It should smell good. Yeah. Right? If it does not smell good, do not put it in your mouth. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And then the next step is to take a bite, chew it, and then spit it out. And just, kind of do that little wine tasting thing, like just see what's on your palate, see what you experience there. And if that passes your kind of taste test, then you can actually taste it and eat it and swallow it, and it's fine. So I think, you have to use your own senses as part of this process. And what I find is that after you break through that barrier and you start doing this on your own, it starts to change your relationship with everything. And when you start eating these foods and you start getting your microbiome healthier and more balanced, and you start realizing that we have this relationship, like, it's a very real relationship when you start making this yourself, you start realizing, wait a minute. So this is pretty good, but like, I don't know what soil this was. I bought these cabbages at the store, but what if I grew my own cabbages? Maybe that would be better. And yeah, it does taste better. But then there's another level. What if I made sure that the soil that I grew those cabbages in was the healthiest possible soil, filled with the healthiest possible microorganism profile? Like, at that point, there's always another level of like crazy healthy you can get.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I find really fascinating about this, is that the whole process of fermentation has led me into understanding ecosystems better. And it's led me to understanding my role as like a symbiont in the world. And that like, it's changed the way I relate to my friends and my community and my family. Like it has such wide reaching, like potential. And so that's the piece that I most want everybody to experience. It's like, I'm teaching you a little, like, this is a skill, but it will teach you something else that I think is just so much more powerful. And I can't explain it to you. You have to experience it on your own to even understand what I'm even trying to use words to explain.
Yeah, no, I'm getting the picture. It's just, it goes pretty deep.
It goes really deep, and all my fermentationists say it. Like everybody has an experience. It's not a standalone experience, and that's what I'm most excited about.
Awesome. Oh, this is awesome. Thank you so much. So we've got a lot of questions coming in, and we're running up on our time here. So we're going to try to get through as many as we can.
Okay, ask, and I'll go grab the red wine vinegar.
Oh, cool. Yes. Okay. So can I fire away while you're getting that?
Yeah.
Debbie wants to know where you get your jars.
So my favorite jar is the Pickle-It jar. It's like pickle without the E at the end.
Okay.
-IT, Pickle-It. And they have really cool little, here, I'll show you what it looks like actually. This is my artisanal hand sanitizer. This is something else completely, but this is cool because the Pickle-It jars have this little gasket. And so this is where the airlock would go. And then when you're done, you put this little cool stopper in there and you put it in the fridge and it's ready to go. They're a little more expensive, but they're my favorite.
Good question. And if you don't have another jar to fit inside the bottom, what should you use? Sandy wants to know.
You know, they make pickle pebbles, little weights. Sometimes people find little saucers at Goodwill. I have, one of my fermentationists found a whole bunch of glass ashtrays at Goodwill that fit in her jars perfectly. But there's a lot of things now. There's a lot of gadgets that you can buy that are very inexpensive. But I would look for a jar there's all different size jars. I would look for a jar or a saucer or something to put in there to help. It really makes a difference. If you don't have one at all, then I would encourage you to maybe add some brine to the top so that you have like 2 inches of brine to keep the anaerobic environment intact. And then what I would do is every day or two, I would go in there and I would push it down with your hands to get those air bubbles out. Because like with this, every day I'm gonna push this down and let those air bubbles come up, and that will help the process.
Yeah, okay. Colleen wants to know, so she has diverticular disease. What are the best fermented foods for that?
I mean, that is such an individual situation because I've worked with a lot of people with that issue, and the triggers are different across the board. People really have to create their own list of foods that work for them and foods that don't. And that's my main recommendation for folks with that disease is like, you really need to know what are your safe foods and what aren't. And then there's a lot of healing work that needs to happen. And so fermented foods might be a picture of that. I just don't know. They might be a picture of that right now, or they might be a picture of that later. I think of the process of like healing the gut as I call it the hippie staircase, where it's like every step is a different color. One has glitter on it. One is covered in yarn. One has stickers. One's pink. One's yellow. Every step you take is a different step in the process of learning. And sometimes as you take that step, you leave some of the old things behind that helped you heal earlier. So it just, that's what I've learned about healing in general. It's just depends on the person. It's so individual. Yeah. But for people, that's a long answer to say, one of the better things that people can try is starting with just like the sauerkraut brine, but even like 1/8 of a teaspoon, like, just a tiny, tiny amount at first.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. All right, tell us about the vinegar.
So the red wine vinegar.
Yeah.
This is made with a pellicle or a SCOBY. Do you see the SCOBY sitting up top there?
Oh, yeah.
Literally floating on the surface.
Yeah.
And do you see the shadow of one down in here?
Yes.
So this is from Spain. And so I feed this red wine because I don't drink, and it makes vinegar. And it's the coolest thing ever. It's a super fun part of fermentation. And this is one where it's not really probiotic, but vinegar does help as a fertilizer for the microbiome, and it also helps with blood sugar levels, and it helps increase your digestion. It does so many good things for you. It can help increase hydrochloric acid, and it slows the emptying of the stomach, so it reduces the glycemic load or the glycemic impact of food.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Smells like vinegar. It's amazing. But I wanted to show you guys because there's just so many cool things. This is one.
Yeah, that's very cool. You had mentioned using like the garlic because it has inulin, which is a prebiotic. Can you just kind of reiterate the purpose, the benefit of that? Like, does the prebiotic feed the probiotics? Does it help them like stay more intact in the gut? What's the benefit of that?
So prebiotics and specifically inulin, they actually are, so probiotics, these bacteria, they eat starches, right? Like when we're talking about fermented vegetables, and a lot of the ones in your gut as well, they eat starch, they digest all of the starches and the fiber that's left over from the food. So when it gets down to your large intestine, you have just this like fiber bolus.
Yeah.
And they start digesting that because they feed on fiber. Now, a lot of different organisms can eat fiber. But when you have inulin, there's only a very small number of kinds of organisms that can break down that starch because of the molecular bonds. So the molecular bonds in inulin are unique, and there's only certain bacteria that have the enzymes to break those down. So we call it selecting. We're selecting for these good bacteria by adding inulin, by adding these prebiotic starches essentially. And I'm not a big, like some people do it using like, green banana flour and, raw potato starch, all these other things. And that's just not, I've seen negative results from that kind of stuff. I think it's really nice to just do it in a really easy, normal, natural, healthy way that people, like our bodies have evolved to do. We're not evolved to be eating green banana flour and raw potatoes.
Right.
So this is something that we've already been doing for a very, very long time.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm going to invite anyone on the call to continue posting their questions. We have just a few minutes left with summer. So post your questions in the chat box. I'm going to refer to I got a list here of questions that people sent in. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth here. So we got Colleen's question about diverticular disease. Okay, so Deborah says, I want to get started making fermented veggies, but I don't know where to start. Do you just kind of recommend like her choosing her favorite vegetable and kind of just going through the process that you just, walked us through?
I would start with do exactly what I just did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And if you don't like any of those, take a vegetable out. If I put one in there you don't eat or you don't want to eat.
Okay.
The easiest way is just cabbage and salt. I just add a few other things for flavor.
Okay. Let's see. What are your thoughts? So, you had mentioned, it's really important to have a diverse gut. What are your thoughts about using functional tests to evaluate the gut? Is there any value in that? How does someone know? I mean, do you do functional testing, or do you recommend just sort of listening to your body? Like, how do you know if your gut is as diverse as it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I love the GI effects test by Genova or GI Map. I think these are useful tests. If you take them, you need to know why you're doing it and when you plan on retesting. So just have your intentions in mind as you do it, because it can get expensive. Yeah. I think you're an everyday person. It just depends. There's so many factors. If I'm working with a client and they have tried a lot of different things and they're getting stuck, like food allergy testing, I will often do that to see if there's something that their body is strongly reacting to. I find the Dutch test, the oats test very interesting, but I also find the GI map can give us some really big clues. Yeah. A lot of times, like with autoimmune people, we'll see like Citrobacter and a few other organisms. There's certain pathogenic organisms that we find in people that have similar symptoms. And so there's ways to help reduce those. So yeah, for some folks, getting a snapshot of that can be useful. Yeah. Right? And it can make it helped me. Like I struggled with Candida for a long time. I resolved it, and then something was up, and so I did a whole bunch of testing, and it showed that I had this really virulent form of Candida. I resolved that, and it was really helpful to like test, retest, find out that was gone. I mean, it really made a difference. So I like it for that reason. You just need to be really clear on the plan, or be working with somebody who's clear on that plan. Otherwise, you can end up spending thousands and thousands of dollars and not really understand why you spent it.
Right. Okay.
And there are a lot of like doctors and practitioners who are kind of looky-loos. They're like, oh, I just want to see what's in there. But it's like, they don't have a plan for what to do. Right. And then you mentioned the diversity. So the Genova test does show diversity. The other thing, I tend to lean, I kind of go both ways. I'm a little bit of a purist as well. And I have to recommend that like eating a diverse diet is the best way to increase the diversity of your gut. In fact, if you look at these various foods, like kiwi skin grows, there's a kind of starch that feeds only one kind of bacteria in the skin of kiwi, right? And then there's like all these different foods. If you go to Japan and you eat a traditional meal in Japan, sometimes you'll be eating 20 to 40 different foods in one meal.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. You're having like a bite or two or three of all these different things. And I think that's more of what we need to think about. In the US, we tend to really get comfortable with about 20 foods per week, and we should be eating at least 100 different foods per week.
Wow. Okay, that's something to think about. I can definitely add more variety. Sandy is asking, can you add inulin powder to the fermented food?
Just like I said earlier, like I wouldn't add any kind of inulin powder. I would just add the vegetables that it comes in.
Okay. And you mentioned garlic. What are some other, if someone isn't a fan of garlic, what are some other things they could add for the inulin?
It's mostly alliums. So that's the biggest place you'll find it. And leeks, it's also in asparagus, but that's a little bit tricky with fermentation because it can end up getting kind of funky.
Yeah.
So yeah, most of the time you're going to find it with the alliums, which is the garlic onion family. But then like with the kimchi I made, and I have a video coming out about this. I'll put it on my Fermentationist YouTube channel. But this kimchi that I showed you guys, I made it with a potato. So I used a potato, I cooked it, I like grated it up, and I cooked this like potato paste, and then I let it cool. Basically, it's cooling down and cooled down, and I added it to this substrate, to the kimchi, and that is also inulin, and so that's going to create that process. So, but it's very specific. If you want to do that with kimchi, you want to do it with all the other spices, because those other spices will help prevent that from getting moldy.
Do we had talked about this when you were sharing your story. What are your thoughts about taking a pre and probiotic supplement? Are you more an advocate for just getting it through fermented foods?
I'm more of an advocate of getting a diverse array of starches in your diet.
Okay.
When you get the diverse array of starches, you will naturally feed the right bacteria.
Okay.
It's hard to not get bacteria in your body. They're there, they're everywhere. They are on the leaves of food. They are on the skins of food.
Yeah.
And so, that's number one for me. Increase the diversity of starches in your diet. And then number two is add in fermented foods. And you don't need to go crazy. You don't need to eat 10 different kinds of fermented foods. You can switch it up seasonally. You can try different things, see what resonates. Listen to your body. Don't be force feeding yourself something just because you heard it was good. Your body does actually have a lot of information for you in terms of what you like. And in fact, there is a huge correlation between acquired taste and bacteria. And they will literally, there's messages like the various bacteriocins and metabolites that they create will communicate to your body, and your body will tell you if it wants more, and it will tell you through taste. So I think that's a really important thing. And then I generally put probiotics and prebiotics last, because even though it's been studied, the probiotics that have been studied are the ones that have patents, that have the most money backing them, have the biggest companies selling them. So we actually haven't ever studied these microorganisms in terms of the ecosystem, right? So when I talk about adding diverse starches, diversity in your food, that's how you increase the diversity in an ecosystem, right? You're changing the substrate, you're changing the terrain. But when you start I always say, like, we kind of have it backward. If you had a forest fire and that whole succession happened that I talked about earlier, and as the forest is regrowing naturally, which it will do over time, we're not going to get that forest to regrow by adding a bunch of like bunnies, bats, and snakes, right? Bunnies, bats, and snakes. We're going to add a whole bunch of bunnies, bats, and snakes. You guys go in and take over and make this forest better. That's not how it works. And when we do that with probiotics, we say lactobacillus and bifidus, like, you guys go in, bacillus, you three, you go in and fix the microbiome for us. And it's like, okay, we as humans, the numbers vary. In a diverse body, it's anywhere from 400 to 1,000 different species of microorganisms living in your gut. And you're going to pick 3 species and say that they're going to do it? Like, that's insane. It doesn't even make sense, And I really feel that people need to understand, look back in time. How have our ancestors done this? They didn't do it by eating just 3 different kinds of probiotics in a pill. The diversity is important of these starches. The food that they eat is important. lowering stress is, I can't help but bring that up because it's such a crucial part of bacterial response in the body.
And can you just clarify, when you say starches, what does that mean? Just so people know what that means when you say starch.
Basically it's a polysaccharide, it's like it's a complex sugar. So it's found in all vegetables, it's found in all fruit, it's found in grains, it's found in legumes.
Fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes. Okay.
It's, it's in pretty much all the food that we eat, except there might, it's not totally present in meat. There might be a few exceptions, but
yeah. Okay. And Loretta wants to know, so can you give an example of when you say like using taste to let you know? She wants to have you give an example of what that means.
So like if you take a sip of miso soup and you don't like it, and yet you heard that miso soup is really alkalinizing for the body, and if it's been aged 6 months or longer, it has probiotics in it, and then it also has these anti-cancer effects, and you're drinking it and you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
And yet you're like, but I heard it's good for me. So you're like overriding your taste, you're overriding your senses, you're really overriding your gut, because your taste buds are really the gateway to your gut. Yeah. So when you're overriding that with everything that you've learned about health and forcing yourself to drink something that you don't like, then you're not listening to your taste. Whereas if you take a bite of sauerkraut and you're like, oh my gosh, that's delicious. Or you take a bite of kimchi and your body's just like, yes. That's what I mean. Like, go for the things that really do taste good to you.
Okay. Yeah. Good rule of thumb. Can you comment on, so if someone has like dairy issues with dairy, like myself, is it okay to have like fermented dairy products like kefir and yogurt? Like if someone's intolerant to dairy, because my understanding is it can break down the sugar, but if someone's like intolerant to the protein, can you just comment on that?
Yeah, if you're casein intolerant, you're not going to be able to tolerate it even if it's been fermented. Yeah. If you're lactose intolerant, then for some lactose intolerant people, they can drink kefir. Some of them can drink homemade yogurt if it's been fermented for 24 hours or more. So there are some ways to do that. I think kefir is the one I've seen be the most tolerated by people who are lactose intolerant. Yeah. I'm casein intolerant, so sadly I just can't it just messes with me pretty bad.
Dairy. And how does someone know if like they haven't done any testing? What are some signs to look for?
Sinus congestion, watery eyes, sneezing. For some people, it comes into their lungs. They get like, they feel like they have to cough, or they have just like a little bit of heaviness in their chest. Okay. Varying symptoms. Some people it's rashes, eczema, things like that. So it varies, but it's one of those things that you can discover doing eliminations and just, trialing it, going 8 days without it, trying it for a couple days, seeing if your body reacts.
Okay. We'll do one more question before we wrap things up here. If someone, for some reason, needs to take an antibiotic, and we know that that can kill a lot of the good guys with the bad guys, what steps can you recommend taking whether it's while they're still taking it and or after they stop taking the antibiotic?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the issue is and why they're taking the antibiotics. I mean, that really is a factor that you want to, put into play. But, eating fermented foods will generally be beneficial, especially when you're eating ones that contain lactobacillus. So the fermented vegetables, kefir, those are beneficial because it has been shown to help with diarrhea associated with antibiotic usage. So just make sure that you try to include them further away from when you take the antibiotics, as far away as possible. I'm not asking you to get up in the middle of the night and do it unless you have a very serious case of something going on. I've only had 2 clients over the history of my work where I've said, you need to wake up and take probiotic pill in the middle of the night. It's like very seldom. So yeah, taking the fermented vegetables, I think, is a really good one. Kefir, if you can tolerate it, or coconut water kefir is another great one. That's a really good way to do it, and just keep continuing that as you get off the antibiotics. It depends. Like, there's all different kinds of antibiotics as well, and it depends on how somebody's reacting and what they're trying to get. I think it just depends. If they're having a strong reaction, they may need to bring in probiotic pills for a period of time. If they need like a lot to come in and like really help to balance out this situation. But, you know, I had to take 21 days of antibiotics last year because I got pertussis, and it was undiagnosed for a long time. And it was really a super weird situation, super unfortunate. And it's the first time in my life where I was like, yeah. And I'm like popping an antibiotic every day. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Every day I felt like significantly better. I had been sick for a long time.
Yeah.
And I had some pneumonia that is a co-infection alongside it. Like, it was miserable. I felt so bad. So taking that, I was like, yes. And I'll be honest, I mean, I had zero reaction to it. Well, that's not true. I had a little bit things were a little bit stinkier than normal. That's all the only change that I noticed. And I say that because in the gut rebuilding program, what we really try to help people achieve, our main goal of the program is to help people achieve the golden doodle. Like, that's really, in a nutshell, what we want happening. We want them to come out easy, effortless, within just a few seconds, and not really that smelly. Like, that's really key.
Yeah.
But that was the only thing I noticed, and I didn't have to do any additional things than what I do every day. Yeah. It was, I mean, people were shocked. My doctors were shocked. They're like, how's your digestion? I was like, I'm totally fine.
Wow.
So I think that, it really does speak to the work that you do day in and day out. When I work with clients who have been eating fermented foods and eating a vast variety of healthy foods for years, when they come and work with me, the way their body reacts and the way that they heal is so much different than the people who have not done that work.
Yeah.
It's profoundly different. And it's really obvious when people have been doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap things up for today. Summer, thank you so much. This was fabulous. So if anyone wants to learn more about you, I do want to say I've done Summer. I haven't finished it, but I've gone through part of her gut rebuilding program, so I highly recommend it. And she has a fermentation certification program. But if someone wants to learn more about you, your programs, if they want to, consult with you, tell people where to go. Gutrebuilding.com.
There is a place to get a little ebook that I have about my top favorite fermented food. I really think you guys should go check that out. And then I also have, I would say gutsandglory.live is another spot where I have a handbook about bitters, which is another really good thing that we could talk about at a later date.
Yeah.
Everything is at gutrebuilding.com. If you go there, you're going to find stuff about fermentation. You'll learn about my programs. And then I do try to post on my YouTube channel. Fermentationist is my handle on Instagram, on YouTube, all of those things. I don't post as much as I would like. I have a huge backlog of fermentation videos that will come out eventually. There are some already posted, and I have the queue right now that's about to go for kids. So those are some easy places to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We definitely want to have you back, because there's all kinds of things we could talk about, but this was a great starting point, I think, for a lot of people. So thank you so much, and good luck with your reno, because it's not quite done, right? We're close. You're pretty close.
Yeah, I'll make a video on my YouTube channel. That's what you're referring to is all, like, I have like 3 videos on my YouTube channel showing what I'm doing here. You guys can see that.
For those of you that don't know, Summer bought a house to basically convert into an office where she can, work but do all of her fermentation videos. So it's been pretty cool that she's got some few videos showing the progression. So that's been really neat to watch. So I'm excited to see the end product.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really enjoyable, and
I'm glad to have you. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know you're busy, so we appreciate your time. All right. Well, we'll say goodbye, and we'll be in touch, Summer. We'd love to have you back.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.